we now move into our 10th plenary session for the 2024 summit entitled Planetary Health Needs Healthy Finance. It gives me great pleasure to invite our distinguished panelists up on stage. Please join me in welcoming Mr. André Hoffman, Vice Chairman of Roche Holding AG. Dr. Simon Zadek, Executive Director of Nature Finance. Ms. Patti Chu, Co-Head of Impact Investment for Silverstrand Capital. Datin Sunita Rajakumar, founder of Climate Governance Malaysia. And Ms. Madelena Mohamed, Head of Sustainability Unit for Bank Negara, Malaysia.
Thank you, everyone. Now, ladies and gentlemen, before we commence with the session itself, allow me to introduce our lead-in speaker, Mr. Hoffman. Mr. André Hoffman is a businessman and firmly believes in business as a force for good and is a passionate advocate for the corporate pursuit of societal purpose and sustainability. André is Vice Chairman of Roche Holding AG, a highly innovative pharmaceutical company established by none other than his great-grandfather in 1896. He also serves on the board of the fully owned subsidiary Genentech, Inc. Alongside these non-executive roles in the family business, André joined the board of System IQ to help drive positive disruption in economic systems and sits on the board of trustees of the World Economic Forum and the Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution. André also has a distinguished career in nature conservation and sustainability. He is the president of Fondation Tour de l'Ouvallette, a world-renowned institute dedicated to wetland conservation, and serves on the boards of Capital Coalition, B-Team, Peace Park, and the Giwardian Foundation. André also helped establish the Hoffman Global Institute in Business and Society at INSEAD and chairs its advisory board. André studied economics at St. Gallen University and holds an MBA from INSEAD. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the podium Mr. André Hoffman.
Thank you very much for this introduction. And let me start by putting out an absolute fact. The life expectancy today for a male is 73 years. 60 years ago, when I was born, in 1958, 65 years ago when I was born, the life expectancy was 49 years. So on one side, we can say that I've beaten the odds because I'm still around, but at the same time, we can say that we have succeeded in doing something quite important for humanity. We have actually reached a stage, a level, where we can do something positive for health in a very real way. We have achieved prosperity over the last 65 years based on a number of measurements. I mean, the life expectancy is one, and I think it's important to underline here that the life expectancy are getting more and more, are joining up. I mean, Asia and other parts of the world are catching up with the North, which is very exciting to see. And at the same time, I have to say that that particular prosperity has costed us quite a lot of energy and has costed us quite a lot of negative sides. So out of the, Is that, yeah. In the same period, in the 65 years which we are considering, we went from a population of 3 billion people to a population of more than 8. And that in itself is quite remarkable, because these 8 billion people are today healthier, live longer, are better educated than they were ever before. So if you look at 65 years, 3 billions to 8 billions, life expectancy increasing, this is all positive. I mean, our operational system functions, it's worked, it's created the prosperity we need. However, in the same period, we have lost 65% of vertebrate species on the planet. We have succeeded in creating a real long-term problem with plastic pollution and organic pollution. We are seeing more and more signs that society is not functioning as well as we would like it. Inequalities are rising. Poor people are getting poorer, rich people are getting richer. We are clearly getting into an area which is not fit for the future generations. So we need to reinvent the system which has brought about this prosperity to make it fit for today's society by reinventing the whole operational system. And this is what this session is going to try to explore today. We're going to try to define what a healthy finance actually looks like. Because finance and nature are linked. We have created the prosperity I've just described based on exploiting nature. You know, we have polluted water, we have poisoned the air. We are getting to a point where we need to go to give back more than take. We need to move away from extraction and pollution to regeneration. And how are we going to be able to do that? By reinvesting into the financial system. I am an absolute strong believer that the finance system is the solution to what we're trying to achieve. There will not be a healthy planet, and therefore there will not be healthy people without a healthy financial system. So we need to be able to look at different dimensions, and I would like to propose 3 dimensions. One dimension is, how can we measure impact of our activities on the planet? When I say planet, I mean on humanity, because the planet, of course, is a bit out of reach for most of our human endeavors. We need to understand that every decision we take has a consequences on a couple of different realms. It has an impact on the natural capital, as we just described. It has an impact on the social capital. In other words, what keeps us together, what makes us work together rather than work individually. And it has an impact on the human capital. That's us, each one of us, individuals. Are we happy? Are we not happy? Where are our frustrations? How can we eliminate them? If every single time we take a decision, we have an impact on these 3 capitals, the human, the social, and the natural one, we will better understand the interdependencies between these 3 capitals to create long-term value. And that long-term value is reflected into the constructed capital, into the produced capital, which will then be expressed in financial terms. In other words, short-term profit maximization, which is the current dogma, is not working for the long term. Now, that has a couple of consequences which we're going to explore on the panel, and I'm personally looking forward to that. So if you want to reinvent the finance, we are going to make a couple of structural changes. We need a new operating system where we are actually measuring impact, but also where we are going to make sure that we can contribute to value for all. And I insist on the for all because the new system will have to be fair. If it's not fair, it's again going to improve these inequalities I just mentioned. But the second consideration is to create an investable an investable field, for new financial solutions. How can we identify what we can put money to work in a way that is beneficial to the system and to the planet? That requires innovation, and innovation has a very simple definition. Innovation is something that hasn't been done before, and we haven't really done finance in a way that looks at the future before. We've done finance in a way that maximizes immediate return, and I think that's the crux of the matter. Somebody very kindly mentioned the fact that my great-grandfather started the company Roche. I believe that we would not have been as successful in the marketplace if we hadn't had this transgenerational thinking, and that's also one of the things that is important in the context of creating a stable financial system. But the premise of this whole conversation is that nature is what supports us. We need to have a complete focus on what nature does, and we need to use all the tools we have in our toolbox as humanity to improve nature and to make sure that nature is something that can continue for the long term. So I come back to my 3 points. The first point is impact measurement. We've discussed that. The second one is bringing nature in, and for that we need to put value on nature. So that's something that has to do with this whole circular economy. How can we use natural resources in a way that will be sustainable and long-term? And that definitely includes also treating the social and the human capital well. So we need to promote happiness, and we need to make sure that social systems function. And the third point, and that's one of the reasons why I come in front of you this morning to talk about this issue, is that we will need to create the framework condition for this structural change. We're going to have to identify the people who are going to make a difference in the next generation. Maybe even in our generation, because timelines are shortening. But people who are going to be sufficiently humble to understand the problem and courageous to do something about it. And then suddenly the word finance takes a completely different definition. I don't know about you, but in my circle of friends, people are terrified about finance. They consider finance as something that's on the pedestal. You cannot change that. Short-term profit maximization is a mantra. Professional people make money. All the rest of the planet sort of lives a bit, but professional people make money. And that is a very dangerous way of thinking, and we need to redefine that notion of success. If we can get to a point where we can get success measured by the contribution to society, the execution of the purpose of companies, the societal contribution of business, then we can use the fabulous entrepreneurial genius that has so far been focused in destroying the planet. We can use it for regeneration. We can use it for recreating. And we can use it for creating a future where people are going to live in harmony with nature. So I'm looking forward to the panel. I just wanted to say, to perhaps re-specify that we are going to discuss 3 things. We need a proper operating system, which will work differently. We need to introduce new regulation, because that's one very important thing you'll have to remember. If there's one thing you'll have to remember when you go home, it's this thing. I was taught at business school that the market is always right. So whatever happens, don't worry. If you don't regulate too much, the market will find a solution. Well, it's a lie. Don't believe it. It's not true. Even if your teachers here at the school are teaching you that, don't believe it. The market is not always right. We need to frame it. We need to govern it. We need to regulate it. And that, I think, is where a big push is needed. And we have some very interesting people on the panel who can talk about this. So anyway, that's what I wanted to tell you. I'm looking forward to a future where business can help to solve the majority of the problems in front of us. I'm looking forward to a world where we can have a human activity that will be regenerative, and not only on nature, but also on social and human capital. And I'm looking forward to a quick abandonment of all this extraction and pollution business, which is really destroying our life. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Hoffman. Ladies and gentlemen, before we hear from our other guests, allow me to introduce our moderator for the session. Simon Zadek is an Executive Director of Nature Finance, Senior Advisor to the Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosure, co-lead of the Task Force on Nature Markets and convener of the Sustainability-Linked Sovereign Debt Hub. He was head secretary at UN Secretary General's Task Force on Digital Financing of the Sustainable Development Goals, Senior Advisor on Finance in the Office of the UN Secretary General, and co-director of UNEP's Finance Inquiry. He co-chaired China's Green Finance Task Force and led the Green Finance Study Group Secretariat under the Chinese, German, and Argentinian G20 presidencies. Prior to this, Dr. Zadek was Senior Advisor to the World Economic Forum and the Global Green Growth Institute, founder and CEO of the international think tank Accountability, and Development Director of the New Economics Foundation. He was visiting professor at the Singapore Management University and the Copenhagen Business School, and has been a senior fellow at Tsinghua School of Economic and Management, Harvard Harvard's Kennedy School of Government and the University of Southern Africa. Dr. Zadek has worked with many corporations, governments, and multi-stakeholder initiatives on their sustainability and broader strategies, been a member of the International Advisory Board of Generation Investment Management, and has published extensively, including the award-winning book, The Civil Corporation. Dr. Zadek, the session is yours.
That's better. Thank you very much indeed. My God, that bio. Yeah, it's amazing what one does when one lives for a long time. As André said, the longer you live, the longer the bio gets. So good morning, everybody. My name is Simon Zadek, as introduced very graciously. Thanks very much to Gemala and the other organizers of this event for bringing finance to life in the context of planetary health. And I just want to make a couple of introductory remarks before we move on to the main panel discussion. And actually, I wanted to start by asking you, the audience, a couple of questions. So finance is a mystery to most people, but perhaps not to everybody. I'm just going to get you to exercise your right hands for a second. Those of you who work in finance, could you just raise your hands? Anyone who thinks they work in finance? It's funny how they're all sitting in the front row. Okay, all right. So, you know, very forward-thinking finance people. And let me just ask you, you may want to keep your hands up, gentlemen. Let me just ask you, those of you in the audience who think they really understand a lot about finance. Well, I hope the people working in finance, at least, are going to put their hands up. Otherwise, I'm a little worried. And those of you who think you know a little bit about finance, just put your hands up. There's got to be somebody else who knows something about finance here. Okay, all right. And those of you, when André talked about the financial system, who sort of understood what he meant, just put your hands up. What's a financial system? Okay, I'm not going to test you, not right now, but I'm just sort of curious. Again, people who tend to know tend to be at the front, which is quite interesting. Okay, so thank you very much. You can relax your hands again. So we spent the last 3 days talking about planetary health, and now we finally come, perhaps not to the only core of the subject, but certainly an important part of it. We have a global economy of $100 trillion a year, and it shapes us, and it shapes the health of the planet and our role in shaping that health. And nature is a core part of that $100 trillion. In fact, our global economy is 100% dependent on nature. So there is no aspect of anything around us that represents our global economy that isn't entirely and completely to do with nature. Yeah, and yet, as André has said, the global economy doesn't value nature. In fact, it cheapens it, overuses it in unsustainable ways. I don't need to run through the numbers. André has already given us a piece of that story. And sitting, if you like, behind the real economy is the financial economy. And finance is not just a flow of money, but it's a system. It's a system of markets, of rules, of governing arrangements and institutions, as we'll hear about, of different types of incentives, sometimes of government subsidies. Yeah, that it's an entire system in itself. And it is the lifeblood of the global economy that in turn shapes nature, which in turn shapes the health of us all. And so although finance may seem an awful long way away from the planetary health agenda, it is actually core to the topic we're addressing. And I think André has made the observation very well in his opening remarks that we need to understand the positive role of business, and we need to understand the positive role of finance But I think, André, you would agree that it isn't always that way in practice. Yeah, and so we're fighting fire with fire. How do we create a financial system that historically has been part of the problem and needs to be part of the solution? We need to reverse its ignoring of health and nature and find ways in which it takes nature into account in order to improve planetary health. And we have a fantastic panel today to help us think that through. And if there's one thing I'd want you to leave at the end of this session with, is some sense in your minds, not of the problem, but of what a healthy financial system would actually look or feel or smell like. Yeah, and I'm hoping the panel will really help us to visualize that over the next hour or so. So I'm going to start, if I may, Madelena, with yourself at the other end. And I'm just going to start perhaps with the three panelists before we come back to you, André, just with an opening question, which is, how do we apply the principles or vision of planetary health to thinking about and creating a healthy financial system? Madelena, maybe let me come to you first.
Right, thank you, Samian. Good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be here. Well, I think I'm going to start. So I'm not going to talk about concepts, okay? So we promise about that. So what I'm going to talk about is more about fundamental of finance. So it's really, to understand what role does it actually play in the economy and in the society. So it's really about mobilizing capital, reallocating capital within the economy. And, for a developing economy like Malaysia, the financial sector has a broader role. It does have the role, to facilitate and enable what we call a transformational shift of the economy and social progression. And, for the financial sector to be able to carry out this role, the financial sector has to be in a state of resilience. So it has to also be in a dynamic. It has to have the agility. It has to be responsive to the changing needs of the economy and society. So it's not just on the economy, but also on the society. But I think, for many decades or even centuries, the financial sector has been functioning, without paying much attention to what impact or what consequences it creates. So, from its actions, it provides financing. Yes, it does provide, growth. Yes, but is that growth sustainable? Is that growth, generate something that is positive to nature, positive to society? I think that is actually a big question mark. And, when you talk to the financial community, issues such as planetary health, issues such as climate change, environmental, these are all alien. It doesn't even appear within the radar of, their business prospects. So now, more importantly, why is that the case? It goes back to, the business model, the mindset, the DNA of the financial sector itself. For many years, the focus has always been what I would say short-termism and also profit maximization. You mentioned about it, André. And, and this partly or mostly is actually, again, driven by expectations of the shareholders, of investors, of markets, of even rating agencies that you want to see profits. And that is actually the topmost priority. So that, and without paying much attention, again, to the values and impact they create. So I must confess, even for the central banking and regulatory community, this is actually a very new area. So yes, we do look at, how finance has actually served the economy. But I think, we are also now beginning to understand that's more to it. And as this understanding grows, as we understand more in terms of the interactions between finance and also its actions or non-actions or excessive actions, there's a need for us to then start integrating nature into the way we look at things. And finance definitely has, again, the capacity to reorient our economy. And, but what is required is actually a radical shift in the way finance thinks about risk, the way finance looks at, how are they actually contributing to the economy, to the society. And I think that is the most fundamental shift that has to happen.
And Madelena, just one question. You talk about finance as if it's a person. Who are we really talking about here? Is it some abstract thing out there, or is it a bunch of people that are meant to be working for us?
It's everyone. So this is actually not, just for the, for instance, the shareholders, the investors, the markets. It's also the regulators. It's also the governments. So I think all the different stakeholders will have to be aligned in terms of how they view finance and what role finance ought to play in the economy and society.
So you would say these people are part of the financial system as well?
All of us.
You're in. Okay, you're responsible. Got it. Okay, fantastic. Okay, Sunita, please, your opening remarks would be fantastic.
So what does a healthy financial system look like, especially now as we are facing a massive macro polycrisis of interconnected challenges as well? So I work in the private sector, I sit on the board of some multinationals, and I also agitate the private sector for increased climate ambition. And arguably through CGM, Climate Governance Malaysia, and the CEO Action Network, what we've seen is the largest private sector mobilization in Malaysia, and it is for increased climate ambition. And why are these businesses agitating for more climate ambition or sustainability ambition, to use it loosely, interchangeably? Because I think many business leaders are seeing that nature is not this other thing, but it's intrinsic to us. And they're also recognizing that capital, the allocation of capital, is really the allocation of someone's pension. That any form of saving is actually someone's form of pension, isn't it? And that legally, it is also in our legal tender is ultimately indexed on nature as well. So when you recognize this, and you also see that cumulative emissions have baked in inevitability for at least up to the end of this decade, there's so much more certainty in terms of the extreme weather events that we will be seeing, more certainty than inflation, than exchange rates, than artificial intelligence, and the financial markets need to respond to this. So what does a healthy financial market look like? There's only so much that private sector can do. I hear what our moderator is saying, that it's everybody's responsibility, but I do feel at this stage, when there's so much delayed action, where we are still talking about net zero 2050, when we know that we are 1.5 degrees of warming already, and that we've crossed almost all planetary boundaries, I feel it's incumbent on policymakers to respond to their social license. So not just businesses having social license, but policymakers and regulators also have their form of social license to respond to what all of society wants. So what does this look like? How are we going to make better informed decisions? So the building block has to be more data, more access to data that will enable us to make better informed decisions. Now, at present, this is not readily available, definitely not in Malaysia, not in the region. We are not able to build up detailed scenarios that will enable us to make better informed decisions. So this is a huge drawback, right? The cost of inaction, the cost of transitions is rising. The size and the challenge that we are facing is getting larger all the time. But investing in adaptation is a no-regret decision. And yet national climate action plans, especially adaptation plans, are either non-existent or insufficient to adapt to the current temperature rise that we are already seeing. And so why are we even thinking of allocating funding elsewhere in the absence of a better business case? we need to be allocating funding to where it really matters, the preservation of nature, reduction of emissions, and of course to adaptation. So these are my points right now.
Thank you very much indeed, Sunita. Just one question. You've sort of wrapped climate and adaptation and nature all into the same thing. And of course, they're all completely interrelated. But does the financial sector see them all in the same way? Or do they respond to carbon in a different way to the destruction of wetlands?
So the conversation on emissions and warming is obviously very much more advanced. In Malaysia, for example, Bursa, the stock exchange, launched FTSE for Good a full year before the Paris Agreement in December 2015. They have been workshopping TCFD. The central bank has come out in the forefront, the vanguard of a lot of climate discussions with a principles-based taxonomy, climate risk management and scenario analysis, and they're conducting stress testing this year. So the conversation for emissions, mitigation of emissions is much more advanced, but we live in a country where there is no climate ambition right now. Our target is net zero 2050 earliest, which is not a target. And you'll see this replicated in many parts of the region. Malaysia has contributed 0.4% of cumulative emissions. So I think there is a lot of thinking that this is really not our problem, it is someone else's problem, or to couch it as common but differentiated responsibilities. When it comes to nature, the conversation is much more nuanced because Malaysia is one of 17 countries of mega biodiversity in the world. We have a long marine coastline, so we also have marine biodiversity. We are stewards of this. And so the responsibility and therefore the accountability needs to be significantly more. So it is different, and yet a lot of people look at it as interrelated.
Fantastic. And I absolutely hear your point about data. André, very much the point you were making about needing the right operating system. Perhaps we'll come back to that in the second round. Patti, let me turn to you if I may. You're in a very different part of the financial system, and you may just want to briefly explain kind of which bit you inhabit, and then perhaps offer your opening remarks on what does a healthy financial system look like?
Yeah, thanks, Simon. Good morning, everyone. So my name is Patti, and I'm representing Silverstrand. Silverstrand Capital is a single-family office. We're based in Singapore. So what role we play, I guess, in this financial system? So I think it's more of the private sector as a single-family office. And I lead the investments, the portfolio that looks after impact. So specifically, what does that mean? Our mission for our impact portfolio is to restore and conserve nature. So all of the investments that we make from that portfolio are very much focused on how do we, what is wrong with the current system, and how do we put nature in the forefront of it. So a lot of what André and the fellow panelists talked about resonate a lot with us. We believe that the current system doesn't value nature properly, and so how do we do that? So part of it is data, part of it, and how do we measure that data? How do we measure the ecosystem services that actually we benefit of, but there's no dollar value to it? The air that we breathe, the water that we drink. So in terms of how does that translate into investments, we look at measurement technologies that can, lower the cost of it, and also be able to, do that at scale and, in real time. So those are some of our investments. The other strategy that we look at is protection. So, the current system is very much about extraction and not about regeneration. So how do we avoid further deterioration? How do we protect what we have? So we're looking for alternatives. So examples, we're looking at seaweed as a feedstock instead of petrol for bioplastics. And the last thing we're doing is around restoration. So really about, we've destroyed so much. How do we also start, restoring? And in terms of how does a healthy financial system look like, I think it starts, with what Madelena was also talking about, the values. So for us, everything, we benefit a lot from, all of the services. And so I think we are very conscious that, the resources in this planet are, actually constrained, are not unlimited. And therefore, if we need to think always about how do we put back to it. So in our investments, we also think about what is that impact, right? How does that, is there negative things that we're not accounting for? And then how do we put that into a dollar value that then affects our potential financial returns as well? But I think as a family office, we see our role as being catalyzers, being able to take that first, more higher risk in order to demonstrate the case, the viability, and then be able to, scale that impact by showing that to, other mainstream financial players and, government. So I think, in terms of what does a healthy financial system look like, I think it does entail, everybody working together from a policy perspective. I think the right incentives has to be in place. It does mean education and, the proper values and understanding that, there are planetary boundaries and this is not unlimited. I think it's in taking that sort of leap of faith and demonstrating, not just talking, but really, taking action. And I think it's a journey. I guess, we've made lots of mistakes as well. I'm happy to to share if, so I'll stop there.
Patti, thank you very much. Just a process question to the organizers. Do we have mics in the room, or are we running the online question model? We are running the online question model. We do have mics. Okay, anybody at this stage want to make a comment, raise a question to any of the panelists? Yes, that gentleman over at the back. If you could just say very briefly who you are and your question, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Ibrahim from the Academy of Science. Well, all of us have witnessed a lot of economic and financial crises in the past. And this relates very much on governance. So my question is, because this governance is a big concern to us, my question is, who guards the guardians? Who guards the people who are in power? And then relates to this is about corruption and power. And if we talk about corruption and power, we are all aware about it, but some of us are not aware of this issue of powerlessness and corruption. Powerlessness is about people who has the authority, who has the power to change, but they don't, or they fail to act on it. So what will be the good mechanism to guard these guardians? Thank you.
Got it, thank you. And was there a second question over there? Somebody else? Yes, the lady on my left, thank you very much. Just give your name briefly and your question, please.
Hi, I'm Amelia. I'm from the University of Oxford. One thing I've been thinking about is the fact, as André was saying, that we've exploited the resources so much, and the people responsible for that mostly are oil companies. And they're also the people that economically have benefited the most. And so when we're talking about finance, how do we navigate the ethical considerations of them having the most finance and therefore being in the best position to fund green energy or green solutions, but also they're doing it from a standpoint of they've benefited from exploiting the resources in the first place.
And just so I understand, who's the they you're talking about?
So for me personally, I have a family connection with Shell, but the oil companies, everyone that's been exploiting all of the resources, they also are in the best position to invest economically. in green solutions,
Got
but
it.
then when things come out of there, how do we navigate the ethics of the fact that those solutions have come out of exploitation in the
Got
first
it.
place?
So how do you turn market players that have been part of the problem into market players that are part of the solution? I'm absolutely sure André has an answer to that in a second. And any other sort of points that at this stage? Yes, sir, one more.
Chris Marshall with the Institute for Planetary Health. There are accreditations, of course, in finance. I'm thinking right now of the CFA charter that have very robust ethic sections for new people entering the organization as well as continuing education. Is there, do you know, a current section in the ethics around planetary health or SDGs to help provide guidance to the finance organizations? Or is it an opportunity for us if not?
Got it. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, I'm going to move on to the second round, and we are going to pick up these questions. I'm not going to deal with them one by one, but I'm going to blend them in to the next round. So thank you very much. We will have a second round. I'm hoping people on the right side also are going to be more active. Okay, André, I'm going to come to you first, if I may, thinking particularly about the Shell-related question and the power-related question. Now, where Patti and you are similar is that you represent a family office, so you take a long view, and André, Roche Holdings is a family business, albeit very large, so you can also take a long view. And I guess I'm curious to understand, thinking about the Shell question, since the world is not made up exclusively of family businesses, but there are many profit-maximizing businesses. How do we move beyond your exceptional examples to dealing with more classical businesses and financial institutions, given the values that you have highlighted as being so important?
Well, thank you very much for the question, Sam. First of all, I question this idea of family business being in a minority. The further down you go, the size of businesses, the more the correlation in investors. The majority of businesses on the planet are owned by one or two families. We talk about the big ones, and of course, once you have the real need in capital, going to the capital market is the best way of funding growth, and that's why you lose the controlling element. So that's number one. Number two, how do we, if we are making investment decisions, we need a model on which to predicate these decisions. And given that we are, as humanity, very much keen to find simplification of the complex systems we're thinking of, the idea of, the Nobel Prize-winning theory in 1976 of Milton Friedman, the business of business is business, was a very simple model which allowed to simplify taking decisions in that context. As long as you look at a finance line, and if you make the money, that's what really matters for the future. So that's the short-term profit maximization I was talking about. That mantra is predicated on a model of Homo economicus, who, by the way, is always a man, always knows everything, and decides only in the short-term interest. Now, look at us. This is not true. We don't live like this. We're humans. We have emotions. We want to do things differently. We don't particularly want to be just talking about the profit line. But that's precisely why this conversation about finance is such an important one, because finance cannot satisfy itself from such a simple model, and it has a lot to learn from nature which is incredibly complicated, nature which is chaotic, nature which has no internal logic. It goes all over the place all the time. If there is balance in nature, it's a nanosecond and then it starts again. And these complex systems, these complex decision tools, we just don't possess yet, and that's where we need to work on. But I don't remember that was the question, sorry.
Yeah, well, it's a good answer. I'm not entirely sure that it's entirely the answer. Let me just push back one more time, which is, I take your point that the majority of businesses in the world are family businesses, albeit quite small ones, but I think we would also agree that non-family businesses, so the larger corporations in the world, have a huge impact on the way in which the global economy works and its impact on planetary health. And how do we bring the sort of long-term values that are instilled in many family businesses into those larger corporations that don't start at that place.
Well, Simon, you made a point earlier on that saying that bankers in general are using our money, and that central banks, are people who are paid by our taxes, and therefore they are really sort of managing our money. Well, the same thing with companies. Companies are owned by us, and they're owned by us collectively. So the traditional orthodoxy I was talking just about is that profit maximization benefits shareholders. We need to shift the definition of success away from just increase in capital value towards a much more societal value. So businesses have to be managed for stakeholders and not just for shareholders. If I give you the example of our family company, Roche, we have defined our purpose in the company to doing now what the patient needs next. Not to maximize the return to shareholders, but to do now what the patient needs next, because if we are successful in doing that, then we have a long-term viable business. I'd quite like to come back to this notion of what is a company. It's only it's only in our lifetime that this focus on short-term profit maximization has developed. Before that, the idea of pooling resources in order to do something for society was, I think, a much more altruistic view. I'm not suggesting profit did not come into it. Of course, wealth is important, but the origin of the word company, eating bread with somebody. That strikes me as being a much more fundamental approach to the way you can do something for society. So if we measure impact, in a way that is recognized by all, in a way that will allow us to talk about outcome for society rather than outcome for shareholders, we would have made a big step forward.
Got it, thank you. And Sunita, I will come back to you in a minute to link that to a lot of questions to you coming through on data. Yeah, and I want you to bring that alive a little bit, as a number of people are asking you about it. Patti, did you want to jump in, or?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a little bit, I think,
Please.
to address that question. I think that, it is true, like, these large companies, like in the case of Shell, to be very, I guess, specific, have benefited from this current system. But I think that, they're also part of that system, right? So you can't just blame them all. I guess it's been a journey for us as well, whether to engage or not to engage with petroleum companies or oil and gas companies. And I think the reality is that in order to shift the system and in order to make the systems change that we want, we need to be inclusive. And the fact that they're open to, in our case, there are investments that they're open to looking at. For example, like the algae example. So we see them as part of the solution. And the fact that we do need trillions of dollars to mobilize and to make this change, and none of us can do that alone. So I'm not saying, we're all like best friends, but I think that we do need to take it on a case-by-case basis and be inclusive and avoid this sort of like, well, that's the, you are from this camp and, we're from this pure camp. Everybody has, past or, made mistakes and all that. So I think, yeah, I'm on the camp of being inclusive and open to change.
Okay. I wonder whether that meets our power and accountability question, but we'll come back to that. I'm going to come back to you in a couple of minutes because I wanted to get you to kind of scale your way of working around impact investing to help us understand how it relates to the system as a whole. But Madelena, I wanted to come back to you if I may. So everyone here seems to be talking about values, power, and accountability, and the importance of policy and regulation, and that's your job. And so you work for a central bank. I'm not sure how many people in the room here know anybody who works in a central bank. I'm sure, yep, there's somebody who does. One person, two people. Yeah, you see, not many people know people in central banks, is the truth of the matter. But I'm sure most people would not immediately think about central banks as being cuddly, yeah, as being warm and nurturing, as having values, and of instilling values in the way in which the financial system works. And yet that seems to be what your fellow panelists are looking to you to do. So help us understand how a central bank rises to the kind of challenges that are being put on the table here.
Right, very interesting question. Well, I would say that, well, definitely central banks and the regulatory community has a role. And, for us, if I can speak on, from the perspective of Bank Negara, it goes back to our mandate and it goes back to our objectives. So when we look at our mandate is really about, promoting financial and monetary stability that is conducive to the sustainable growth of the Malaysian economy. And I think that is actually a very important mandate because it does talk about, what is the end game that we want to achieve at the end of the day, which is actually sustainable growth. And, for us to, and in terms of the objectives, one of the objectives of the central bank is really about, developing a financial sector that is sound, that is progressive, that is inclusive. And I would think that, the part on inclusive financial sector is something that is very unique for Malaysia or for Bank Negara Malaysia. Now, and based on the mandates and also the objectives that we have, we've started to integrate, ecological integrity, sustainability into, the core financial sector. And this started back in 2017. And, it started with a group of Islamic banks. Now, question is, why Islamic banks? And this goes back to the tenets and the overarching objectives of Sharia, which is really about, to preserve and also to advance the common society at large by preventing harm and maximizing benefits. So I'm going to emphasize preventing harm, maximizing benefits, and not profits, benefits. So what we did was really, to work with the Islamic banking community, and we came out with what we call the value-based intermediation strategy. Now, this is really about reorienting how Islamic banks are to think, how Islamic banks are to operate, how, their DNA, their processes, the way they think about their business strategies are to change. So, it's really revamping the way the Islamic banks are to work. And that is one of the first things that we did back in 2017. And the focus is really about, not just profit, it's what we call beyond profit. It's really looking at, what values and what impact you create to the community and to the environment as well. So those are some of the things that we've done so far. I can talk more later.
Okay, and I think it would be worth just saying more broadly, Bank Negara Malaysia is part of an international network of central banks that are focused on so-called greening the financial system. This was created back in 2016. Malaysia was one of the early joiners of that large network of central banks, and it's really the first time over the recent years that we've seen central banks engaging in that broader climate and environment agenda. So it's kind of early days, and it's really great to see your work as sort of part of that change process. But I got to push back a little, right? Which is central banks are very conservative. Yeah, I'm inspired by your comments and sort of wondering whether you're out in front alone or whether you feel the central bank here, as well as elsewhere, really can rise to the ambition that is being expressed in this event here over the last few days.
Well, I wouldn't say that I'm alone, and I can say that I'm speaking on behalf of my organization. So, this is actually a central bank agenda for us. It's an organizational agenda for us, and this is also can be seen in the financial sector blueprint that we issued back in 2022. where, we talk about the role of finance under 3 broad themes. We talk about finance for all, finance for sustainability, and finance for transformation. So we're really revamping the way, finance is to work. And one of the core themes under that blueprint is really about values, finance and the values that it creates. So, yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. Sunita, I'm going to come to you if I may. There are all sorts of questions that are sort of related to you. I wanted particularly to ask you to bring the sort of data measurement side to life. There's a sort of I wouldn't call it a myth, but there is an argument that says we can deal with power and accountability issues through better measurement, impact, and communication. And I wonder whether that's really true. Kind of what does it take to translate data, natural capital accounting into real change in the way markets work?
So let's look at it from 2 aspects. I think the massive momentum that we've seen in the last few years for increased reporting and disclosure is a double-edged sword. There are many businesses that look at this as a framework issue, and they're reallocating accountants to deal with this. But it's a double-edged sword in that the reader of accounts can compare and can very easily tell if this is a reporting entity that is just meeting targets or if they're really striving to embed sustainability into the DNA of the business. So if they're using data collection, analytics, scenarios to become a more responsible corporate citizen, as it were. So that's one aspect of data collection that we're seeing. And the regulators, Singapore, Malaysia, are looking at creating dashboards so that you also have comparability as well. And that's going to make for more efficient capital allocation. The other aspect of data to enable better informed decision making is, especially if you have multilateral organizations that I feel are not fit for purpose, if they are still talking about warming at the end of the century, for example, or still trying to wrap their arms around what planetary boundaries still look like, then I feel it's incumbent on jurisdictions, industries, business sectors to be on top of their own data sets. So, and that was one of the questions here at CGM. We've got a group of volunteers working on what we call a national climate risk dashboard. And the basic climate data sets that we're looking at are wet bulb temperatures, precipitation, which will also give us a line of sight to flash flooding, landslides, and sinkholes, deforestation and emissions, especially methane hotspots. So for methane, for example, we might think that this is a Petronas or a Tenaga problem, the national utility company, but what if it's landfills? What if it's large hydro? What if it's palm oil mill effluents, for example? So without mandating reporting disclosure, it's very difficult to really wrap your arms around how big is the scale of this problem, where do we allocate capital, where does adaptation efforts need to go. So at present, we're still relying very much on meteorological department advisories every day. But surely there's some level of predictive forecasting, and that's going to provide the basis for an early warning system, for example. So this is where it comes back to a healthy financial system is the responsibility of everybody, but for them to make informed decisions about whether they need to be out of doors, where's their next home going to be, they need access to data.
Brilliant. I'd love to dive into that further, but I'm keen to go to Patti and then come back.
Sorry, Simon, can I just add? Yeah, no, I just have to say, what the central bank is also doing on this front. So data is really a big issue. Yes, we do know. So what we have done, among others, is actually to set up a platform which we call Joint Committee on Climate Change. And one of the focus area for this is really about bridging the data gap. So what we have done so far is to come out with a climate data catalog. So what it does is basically identify what kind of data is needed and what is available out there and where those data is currently residing. And we've identified about 149 data items so far, and we are now in the midst of, working with the relevant public and private sectors, to enable access to those data.
Got it, thank you. Patti, I'm going to come to you the last in this round, and then I want to go back to the audience, so folks, prepare your questions. Patti, you and Silverstrand exemplify a financial system that is impact-focused, but you are a tiny spot on the landscape. Yeah, and the impact investing community has grown obviously very significantly over the last decade, but it's still a tiny spot on the landscape. How does one take what you and others in the impact investing community are doing and make it the way in which finance works?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's one that I think we battle all the time. So I think, in Singapore, there's, an increasing number of family offices that have been setting up shop there. And so I think starting from there, we're trying to mobilize, other family offices by leading by example. And so we're part of this community of family offices, and so we try to, from there, scale a bit the sort of have co-investments and scale that impact. But you're right, at a larger scale, in terms of how do we engage with mainstream financial institutions, has been part of our strategy as well. So, for example, we've anchored a debt fund that provides farmers essentially the capital to transition from conventional agricultural practices, so using chemicals and fertilizers, to more regenerative organic practices. The issue is that there needs to be a 3-year transition period for the soil to recover, and then for farmers to be able to get the accreditation of organic or regenerative organic. And no bank wants to finance that transition, because that means that in that period the yields go down. There's a lot of uncertainty. But the reason why we did that was to really show and demonstrate that it is bankable. So it was a small fund. It was a $10 million fund. It's doing well. Repayments have happened. Land, thousands of hectares have been, transitioned now. And now, to engage the financial sector, there are, larger institutions that are interested to have an exposure in the agricultural sector, but they're not going to be agricultural banks. And so, sorry, am I doing too much lingo?
No, you're not, but I'm going to ask you a question, because something just came up on the screen.
Oh.
So if you look at the last one,
Yeah.
given we're running out of time, how can we speed this up? So I'm going to come back to what you're describing and suggest that the viral effect of let's engage and convene and be inclusive and convince, I'm going to suggest to you it takes too long. Yeah, so what does it take to phase shift what you're doing into the larger system?
Yeah, I mean, if I had like a magic wand and I could make a wish, then it would start from the top, right? So we are doing it from the bottom up, saying, hey, this works, demonstrate it. But if I had a magic wand, I'd do it from the top. So I know it works, and I'm going to set it as a mandatory requirement, right, at a policy level.
So
and then that makes it mandatory, and therefore everybody has to do it.
Got it. It's Madelena's job.
Oh, yeah.
Right, it's
It's
Madelena's
Madeline's
job.
job.
Okay, all right. You're being left with a heavy job here, I can see. I'm just going to turn back to you as a community and perhaps invite, there's a question at the back. I think you've got to go to the side to where the mics are. If you could just sort of dash across, either to the left or the right. Let's take a few comments or questions, or even in the middle. There we go. Yes, sir.
Test. Okay. Hi, my name is Jerry. I'm from Indonesia. And yes, I think picking up what was been said about family offices and non-profit, there are a lot more coming up now. Slowly, but there's a lot more. But what I find it a bit tricky is that most of these family offices or foundation that's owned by big businesses created these family offices putting a drop in the bucket to what they would have spent to actually transform their core business. Now, how can we kind of like move away from using that as a shield and kind of hold them accountable to actually change what really matters on their core business? Changing fossil fuels, for example, and things like that. Based on the report from COP28, I think, 200 billion is spent on investment for renewables or any nature-based solutions, whereas $7 trillion has been invested directly to harmful businesses that have adverse impact on the nature. My question is, how much more do they need to go so we're not investing in them anymore? When can you, as financial institutions, say no to investing in them?
Got it. Thank you very much indeed. Are there any other points? Yes, lady, I can't even see. Yes, please introduce yourself. Sorry.
Yes. Hi, I'm Junkit from a youth-run NGO. So actually, I have a suggestion that a case study we can look at. So actually, Norway is powered by mostly hydro, yet it's one of the largest oil-producing countries in the world with up to 2 million barrels a day, and they hold 1% of global stocks, and which amounts to about $200,000 for every single citizen of 5 million citizens in Norway itself. And their city is zero emission by 2030, specifically Oslo. And they are very aggressively doing this because they are taking the taxations on oil industry and applying it in green industry and building it. So my question towards all these panelists here is, how can we, as every single other countries or cities in the world, model these type of implementations or these type of systems in place to actually develop most of the financial issues that we're facing here? Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Yeah, Norway, a country of extraordinary contradictions, major contributions, but very much oil-financed. Another comment from the floor, perhaps? 1, 2 more? There's one over there. Thank you. Yes, please.
What a wonderful panel. Thank you so much. It's really related to the question, Patti, as you said, it hit it on the head. It comes from the top. But even with family offices, impact, all the rest, the model is still some measure of return. And that's generally a financial return or it's a blended return. How do we begin to invest in policy shift? And even if that's a very difficult thing to measure in terms of return, it's certainly, its impact is going to be the significant thing. And I just wonder if that's now a next level up. Thank you.
How do we invest? I'm sorry, can you just kind of rise to your feet once more? Just like, give us another sentence or so, just so everyone understands the question. I'm probably just speaking for myself. I'm still trying to get my head around it.
So yesterday we talked about causality and attribution. And it seems to me that, all roads lead to the top in many, many ways. So how do we actually ensure that the top shifts and we make the investment in making that shift? It seems we don't spend enough money, time, and effort in actually making that shift. Does that make sense?
Yes.
What I'm trying to reach.
Thank you very much indeed. Much appreciated. This gentleman here in the middle, do you want to just give your name and then the point?
Yes, hi everybody. My name is Christian Rødland. I'm from Norway. I just wanted to comment on the case that was just mentioned.
Absolutely welcome.
I think it's important to state that we have to stop looking at Norway as an example to follow, actually, because they are really over-exploiting natural resources, oil and gas, but also other natural resources, to obtain a very unsustainable way of life for the citizens. So I just want to comment on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. That's led to a splay of other hands. Okay, two questions at the back on the left. One question. Yes, sir.
Hello. Thank you so much. My name is Silverstrand Kompore. I work from John Hopkins University. I'm based in Burkina Faso, West Africa. It's a pleasure for me to be part of this session. My question is regarding the private sector investment. How can we strategically engage the private financial institution to increase their investment in sustainable development, particularly in the environment protection initiative, supporting the community initiative, supporting the government action plan implementation regarding the climate change, regarding the environment protection? And another question additionally is what specific contribution can the private sector make to effectively implement the National Adaptation Plan with focus to environment preservation? Thank you.
Sorry, could you just repeat the second question again?
The second question is what specific contribution can the private sector make to effectively implement the National Adaptation Plan with focus on environment preservation?
Great, thank you very much indeed. I can see one, I'm going to take two more. This lady at the front here on the round table, and then somebody or other halfway in the back, in the middle.
Good morning. My name is Aditi Thorat from the Global Commons Alliance. The question I have is about course correction and the data that we already have on scenarios, impacts. So I'm wondering, can we not, with the existing data, already do things that will enable us to change? And the second question is about pension funds. If we can be really specific and say, you know, pension funds, all our money is invested in pension funds, which is public money. Is there something we can do to really ensure that these funds are invested in sustainable investments?
Thanks very much. And this sort of continuous point about that, André, I think you started, but also Sunita, you reinforced, which is this is our money. This money doesn't belong to the banks. You know, it doesn't belong to the asset management companies. Those are all just intermediaries that are meant to be in the service of us. So what does it really mean for us to be the capital owners? In reality, not in theory. So I think coming back to the panel on that in a second would be great. Yes, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Shweta Narayan. I'm a climate and health campaigner. And it's really heartening to see this conversation about present and future in terms of reforming financial systems. I just want to understand where's the acknowledgement of the harms that's already been done, and what is the allocation in the minds of the financial mites about repairing and those harms and the reparations that are owed to the most marginalized, most vulnerable sections and in the global south. How is the thinking around that developing?
And can I just stay standing for a second? I'm going to prompt you to answer your own question, which is not so much the broader question about reparations, but how does that relate to the financial sector, in your view?
While we're making provisions for now and future, where is the allocation for the harm that is done, which is continuing and will continue irrespective of the new way? So, I mean, my question back to you is, what's the thinking evolving on that? We're learning lessons from the past for present and future. How are we fixing the problems that continue from the past?
Thank you very much indeed. Is there a last lurking question, or can I turn back to the panel? I think we've, yes, there's one more at the back on the right there, please.
Hello, my name is Izzuddin. I'm a former capital market player in
Just
which
speak
I
up,
was on.
speak up a little bit more.
Sure. My name is Izzuddin. I was in the capital market on the sell side. So my question is actually to Miss Patti. Just wondering, as far as commitment when it comes to fresh capital into sustainable funds, what is your outlook at this moment and also the future? The rationale for this question is just simply, for example, funds can have their own fund life, which is about maybe 5 years on average. So when it comes to fresh money, are there fresh money coming to actually sort of continue in the case of is there any exit on the companies in the fund? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Fantastic set of comments. I'm sure the panel is going to answer everything completely perfectly. So let me now turn to the panel. Madelena, I'm going to start with you again. I'm afraid you're sort of in the hot seat here because once everybody thinks about it, they go, actually, it's your job. And I guess I'm keen for you to help us understand how much real space to make change do central banks, financial regulators, and supervisors have? They're not policy institutions. Yeah, there's a separation often of government policy from financial governance. Kind of what really should be expected of the world's central banks, including your own, and what shouldn't?
Well, I would say that, for us to actually make this system shift, so it's not the sole responsibility of the regulator. So all the different components, the policy, the governments, the private sector, all will have to rally our efforts together. So it's not just a one man or one person show. So everybody will have to rally and play their part. And we are doing our part, not only, through the way we regulate and the way we supervise our regulators, but also, the way we, in our communication and engagement with the government as well. So we do a lot of what we call advocacy. So we do provide advice to the government as well. And we do also work in partnership with the government and also the private sector as well, beyond just the financial institutions.
Okay, I'm going to push you slightly further. I've over the years had many interactions with different central banks, those who have sort of become independent of government policy. They often make the observation, we don't have the mandate to have a climate policy. We don't have the mandate to have a nature policy. We need to figure out where climate and nature fits into our mandate to ensure a healthy financial system. Now that difference is really important, yeah, and it limits, one could argue, what you believe that you can do as a central bank. Could you just spell that out a little bit?
So you're very right. So you mentioned earlier about the Network for Upgrading the Financial System, which is a grouping of central banks and regulators globally. And you're right, it goes back to the mandate, what the mandate of a central bank is. And it actually varies across jurisdictions. So as I mentioned earlier, in our case, in the case of Central Bank of Malaysia, our mandate is very broad. It's promoting monetary and financial stability that is conducive to the sustainable growth of the economy. And when we look around, not many actually have that kind of mandate. Mostly they would have monetary policy mandate, that's it, monetary stability mandate, or they have inflation mandate, or they have financial stability mandate, and however and whatever they interpret that to be. But in our case, we've actually made a deliberate action to actually have a very clear and also mandate that would be suitable and appropriate for a developing country like Malaysia.
Thank you very much indeed. André, I wanted to turn to you if I may. Obviously, if there's a particular question you want to address, do, but I wanted to ask you one question in particular. You've often made the observation, we need to create a financial system that is responsive to nature and climate and people, but ultimately what the financial system does is to invest. Yeah, that it's not just getting out of bed to manage risk. Yeah, and it's not just getting out of bed to address impact. It has to have a way of understanding the investment landscape. And I know that one of the things you think about a lot is what that really means through a nature lens. What really is the nature investment landscape that the global financial system needs to think about? Because that helps us move from a sort of pure compliance, what it shouldn't do, to actually what it should be doing.
Well, Simon, thank you. Your question is contains in fact itself its own answer. I think it's important to take a step back. We have constructed very sophisticated instruments to try to help us to do this asset allocation. But really, when we are talking about investing, we should be thinking about three things. We should be thinking about how do we decide in which subject we are going to invest, not only our money, but our time, our know-how, our science, or whatever it is that we have in our pocket. And then the moment this decision has been taken, this big decision has been taken after weighing a lot of different factors, we are going to have to manage the risk that goes with it. So yes, finance does not go out of bed to manage risk, but if it doesn't manage risk, it is exposing itself to failure. And today, a manager, male or female or whatever, who actually decides to invest irrespective of the risk of the future, irrespective of the loss of nature, irrespective of the societal disruption brought about by our current system, is just not being professional. It's just taking a decision which is not based on full understanding of what's happening around the place. And if you don't know what the risk is, then you shouldn't be investing. Now, why are we continuing to do it? And there are a couple of questions on the slide who refer to this. It's because of competition. You just need one person to play by different rules for being systematically defeated in the income front and in the success in investment, and that pushes us downstairs. But really, we should be able to think about the long term. We've been mentioning for a number of times this notion of pension funds, of either as an institution or investment being somebody else's saving, being for the rainy day. I mean, today, investing into this sort of thing without considering the long term is, and I repeat it, is simply not professional. And the sooner we get into that dimension, the quicker, the better we'll reform the system. So I guess the answer to your question, Simon, is a very simple one. What is success? And that's something that is way outside of the finance remit. It's a way we decide to live with each other. What's our social contract? What do we owe to each other? How can we get together, create a better society? So yes, we have the financial instrument, we have a lot of other ones as well. And I think as long as we don't reflect this notion of success, this notion of human success, this notion of happiness in the financial system, then it's going to be quite difficult. When I say things like this, I see the eyes of people going to the sky and saying, oh my God, he's at it again. We need to make money because if we don't make money, we're not professional. Well, no, making money just for the sake of making money is not a way of contributing to societal success or to societal happiness. And I think we really need to seriously think again about what it is we are trying to do with all this.
But André, just to...
I knew this was not going to satisfy you as an answer.
I'm definitely not going to let you stop at that. So it sort of brings us back a little bit to this family firm versus sort of classical Anglo-Saxon fiduciary, or maybe different when one looks at not just Islamic banking, but Islamic economy.
Yeah.
And I guess the question then is, are you really saying that none of this stuff works unless we change the underlying logic of corporate governance and the role of business? Do you eventually end up way out there going, profit-seeking companies are simply not going to be able to deliver on our agenda?
No. we discussed earlier on this notion of incentives. How do we incentivize people to do the right thing, and how can we ensure that the decisions are guided not just by short-term personal consideration, but by long-term benefit to society? A company that is run according to long-term value creation and satisfaction of purpose to help the stakeholders is by definition ticking off the first box. It has to be profitable. If it isn't profitable, it's not sustainable. And if you want to introduce a real sustainability, we need to stop measuring the short term and we need to move to the long term. You know, it sounds a bit like a mantra, which I'm repeating all the time, but the example I usually give is the example of the car. You know, if you buy a car, you would not use a car without paying an insurance premium. Now, first of all, it's the law, and secondly, you know that there's going to be an accident at some stage, so you need to be prepared for when it happens. Well, is it normal that we take our big investment decision without paying a premium? Do we really need to construct a factory just on the lowest possible cost without considering the risk of the future? I think that there's a fundamental reappraisal of what the investment, of what the asset allocation is, but it doesn't mean that we must throw away the notion of profit. We just need to understand that the profit is something that is not just expressed in financial numbers on day one, but that it is something that lasts longer.
Brilliant. Thank you. Sunita, could I turn to you? There are just a host of questions that you could answer. There are a couple I was particularly keen for you to pick up on, but you must also choose for yourself. One was this sort of question of reparations, which is, you know, when I listened to the question, I thought about all of the climate litigation that's going on and how that litigation is increasingly being focused on the financial sector and whether actually that's part of, since the financial sector is managing our money, if they lose those litigations, effectively they're taking our savings to pay for those reparations of some kind. So I was curious to get kind of your take on, is the financial sector accountable for what has happened, or is that the wrong way of thinking about how to move forward? Over to you.
So I think the largest emitters in the world are already facing this question because they're being sued. There's climate litigation requiring them to be accountable. And in the Philippines, that has evolved into being a human rights case, that you have infringed on my human right to, and is agreed by the Human Rights Council and UNGAR, to a safe, healthy, sustainable environment. So this is already being translated into financial effects for large emitters, especially. And it's just a matter of time before this is the case in relation to biodiversity or nature risks as well. Much delayed, as I'm sure we will all agree to. But so this begs the question of reporting and disclosure is the first step of a legal strategy for claims and reparations. So I sue to get disclosure from you, and having disclosed, the next stage in litigation is to demonstrate that you haven't done enough, you're not Paris-aligned, for example. And this is where organizations like MSCI, when they calculate the warming potential of a business, they don't take into account any offsets. They're just looking at absolute emissions. And then the third stage of litigation, as we are already seeing, is you sue the stewards of the organization, the boardroom. So many businesses, and we're seeing a bifurcation here, those who still think this is a reporting and disclosure problem, and those who are very keen to meet society with the products, the emissions levels, the nature conservation that all of society wants. But Simon, I want to go back to the point about data sets as well, because for policymakers to make informed decisions, for businesses to decide on efficient allocations of capital, we still need access to data sets. In that case, we can we can then identify risks, we can manage risks to risk takers and allocators of capital, and we can hold policymakers accountable as well. You should have known, or this data was available, you failed to provide warning, or you failed to invest in adaptation measures. So the bedrock of accountability has to start with access to data.
Brilliant. Sunita, thank you very much indeed. Patti, I'm going to come to you and actually begin the last round with you as well. Obviously, pick up on anything you would like, but in the last few minutes, I'm going to ask each of the panel members, starting with you, just sort of, if there was one thing, sort of crystallizing this conversation, one thing as concrete as possible that would advance a healthy financial system at scale that is aligned to our planetary health objectives, kind of what would be the big thing that you would want to see actioned, and maybe even the thing that should be included in the planetary health roadmap that's being discussed here this afternoon?
Maybe I'll just start by, there was one question around policy, whether we invest in that. It's a really interesting question that we've been thinking about as well. So, I mean, within our portfolio, yes, most of it, like André mentioned, I think we see that it needs to be self-sustaining, the business, because otherwise we're not even able to achieve the long-term impact, right? So therefore, we do believe that we need to seek financial returns. The question for us is whether it's financial returns at all costs, and that is a big no. So we need to take into consideration what are the social impact and environmental impact. So everything that we look at, if it's just pure finance, it's not looked by my team, right? But I think the reality is that there are things that need funding, but are not at this point, don't have a clear business model. So like policy, so we use our philanthropic capital for that. So those are just pure grants, but are very much kind of thinking strategically of what does that policy lead towards and how does that then help our other investments. So that's just one point. So I think, if I think of it in how does pertain to us, I think if the financial institutions, which we see that there is some progress going there, but maybe not at the speed that we would like to, if they would clearly not fund certain industries or anything that they look at, there's a very clear signaling towards certain industries on how to change. I do think that, if the cost of capital were much higher for some, and then, so I think it will motivate innovation in certain industries, and then it allows us as investors or, VCs or family offices to look at it as opportunistically and then be able to make the entire, wheel start flowing.
Brilliant, Patti, thank you. Sunita, we have a very short amount of time. This is the sort of the one-hit wonder, kind of what's the one thing that you would want to see advanced? And then I will also come to you, Madelena, and André, finally to you on the same question.
I'd like to see policymakers and regulators step up to give us access to data that will enable better informed decisions. And in that light, I'd like to give a shout out to the former Minister of the Economic Planning Unit who's with us today, Tokpa, and he stuck his neck out 3 years ago to actually use phrases like net zero in the 12th Malaysia Plan for the first time ever, despite a lot of resistance. And we need more leaders like that.
Thank you, Sunita. Madelena, the one big thing, it can be about what you're going to do, or it could be about what somebody else has to do.
I think what we need is a radical shift in the mindset and expectations, of all the different stakeholders to focus and prioritize more on positive outcomes for the community, for the economy and society.
Thank you very much. André, you started our journey 90 minutes ago. Kind of, where are you now on that sort of one thing that you would really want to see advanced coming out of this meeting?
Well, thank you for giving me the last word after having given me the first one. I think that this is a human problem. It's not a structure problem. It's not about incentive only. It's not just about investment success. It's about what we really feel is important internally as individuals. If I had a wish, it would be to eliminate violence of the process. Let's just try to do it together. Collaboration is better than domination, and the structure of the financial institution is something we invented. We control, they work for us, and so why don't we impose different conditions? What we do want is maximizing everybody's approach to this, and we need to remove all the things that stand in the way. How much is enough? What is happiness? These are the questions that are going to lead to the creation of an economic sector that really functions and serves humanity.
Thank you, André. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope the one thing you do take out from this conversation is, quite apart from the exemplary performance of the panel, that the topic of finance and the role of business needs to be a core pillar in any work that is pursued in the area of planetary health. And it has to be to harness their capabilities as well as mitigate their weaknesses that have emerged over many generations and in many different ways. I'd like to thank you all very, very much for listening in, for staying put, particularly for those who asked very tricky questions, some of which we hopefully have partially responded to, but certainly not completely. And I'd like to ask you to join me in thanking the panel for really a very interesting 90 minutes indeed.
Thank you so much. And ladies and gentlemen, we should acknowledge Simon for his excellent moderation of this session. If you had a TV talk show, I think you'd have a very large audience.